Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. So in this video I'm going to take a look at how we trim the AH-94 Dragonfly. I've seen on social media a few people struggle with this concept and how we trim the helicopter and why we trim the helicopter as well. So in this video I'm going to try and go over some of the basics, how you can trim the helicopter, and a little of why I know that you would need to trim the helicopter. I don't know all the aerodynamics about helicopter flight, but I have learned a little over the past few months. So I'll try and share that with you now. So let me get you into my view so you can see what I see, and then we'll take it from there. Okay then, so here we are in my view. We're very zoomed in because most of what we need is going to be on the hood today. So first of all, we have the yaw trim ball, which is down here. So when we are in trim, this ball is in the middle, in yaw trim. And then we also have the trim square down here. Sorry, it's a little bit wobbly. But we've got the trim input square down here. So the V at the top is our yaw input. The dot in the middle is our stick input, so if I move the stick around you can see that moving. And then the circle is the the cyclic yaw, so this is the cyclic. So we're going to use this square down here, we're going to use the yaw ball down here, and we're also going to use this up here. So this circle in the middle, this represents the centre of gravity effect on our helicopter. So if we lean over to the left, that leans to the left. You see it went back to the right, so it shot over to the right. So again, once we are in trim, this should be pretty much in the centre here. So again, using these three readouts on the hood, we can use those to get the heli in trim. So first of all, let's get in the air and we'll take it from there. So just gradually bring it up. So at the moment, no trim whatsoever. I've not put side trim on for takeoff, which I would usually do with the yaw. I'm just going for no trim at the moment. And the easiest way to do this is just get collective up all the way to start off with, to learn this. And I'm going to try and keep the velocity vector roughly on the horizon line here. So now I'm looking at this, keeping the velocity vector roughly on the horizon. I can start using the trim now. So first things first, I'm going to notice down here, if I keep the stick input in the centre, you can see that I'm slowly drifting off and up to the right. If I let go, you can see it wants to drift off that way. So first of all, let me get myself straightened back up again. And I'm just going to start moving the yaw circle, we can see down here, just off to the left a bit to counteract that right roll. So again, hands off now, we've got most of that in control. And then I'm also just going to add a little bit of yaw trim to get the ball in the middle down here. So I should be trimmed side to side. It's gone off to the left again, so make sure I've got all of the right one. So I'm going to let go, and I'm going to bring the trim ball back into the middle. So there we go. So the trim ball is now back roughly in the middle. Now I can see my stick input is just off to the side of the circle, so I'm going to try and put the circle where the stick input is, and now I'll let go. So now you can see I'm getting relatively stable, but I can now see that this ball is still drifting off to the right. So because of that, I'm going to put a little bit more left input, and then I'll let go again. And now we can see the ball wants to drift off to the left. So I'll counter that with a little bit of right input. I'll get my velocity vector steady again on the horizon. I can see the ball is still pulling off slightly to the right there. But there we go, it's coming back centre. And now we can see the nose is dipping. So I'm going to put a little bit of backwards trim on. The ball is still ever so slightly off to the right here, which means we are still leaning ever so slightly to the right. So again, just a touch of left-hand trim on. Oh, we're going off the other way now. So let's bring that back steady. And let's let go there. So again, it's slowly drifting off to the left. So a slight bit of right. And there we go. So we see the ball isn't moving. The trim ball at the bottom isn't moving, and we are hands off. So we are pretty much in trim for full collective, and we're maintaining a height of around 1,600 feet. Again, you can see I am slowly drifting off to the side. That's because, if you notice, the speed is increasing, which means the forces on the blades are actually changing. So we have to constantly trim, basically, as the forces on the helicopter change, as our forward speed changes, as the collective input changes. We have to constantly monitor our trim. Now, if we were in a proper helicopter, this would actually make a difference, because while you're flying the proper helicopter, while we're out of trim at the moment, so it's kind of ever so slightly pulling off to the right, you would feel that in the stick. You would feel it pulling against you, so you would be forcibly pushing back against it. So to trim the helicopter means you're not fighting against the blades. But in this game, you don't really need it, because we don't have force feedback in the stick. So just to show you, if I now go to half collective and let go, you can now see that the trim ball, again, I haven't changed the trim, but it's pulling way off to the right there. So that's just because I've changed collective. So once again, I'm going to try and put the trim circle over my stick input, and just by changing that little bit of trim, you can see that I'm almost in trim. I've got a little bit of backwards tilt, so it's pushing me back up, and I can also see that my yaw ball is off center there. So once again, I'll just gradually get a steady, pointing at the horizon. I'm going to trim the yaw ball into the middle, so we're not drifting sideways, so we get the yaw ball in the middle. I'm going to just nose down, so my velocity vector is on the horizon line, so I'm going in relatively stable forward motion. I'm looking down here and I can see my trim circle is off the trim ball, so I'll try and move that back over, and then I'll let go. I see my trim is way off, so I'll grab it back. Again, try and pull it into stable flight. And again, I can see my input and my yaw, so the input ball is off to the right of the yaw circle. So again, I'm going to try and put that where it is and then let go. It's too much. Let's go a bit back to the left. Again, I'm watching this ball to see how much it pulls over. So we're ever so slightly up and right, so ever so slightly left and a touch back down. It's a bit more to the left than I wanted. And get the trim ball in the middle. And there we go. We're pretty much in trim again. Hands off. So that is how we trim the helicopter, and as I said, there are a lot of reasons why. So if you're changing the input on the collective, when you change the collective, by the way, you're not adding power. What you're doing is adjusting the blades. That's what the collective does. It adjusts the angle of the blades to give a higher or lower angle of attack. So a higher angle of attack is going to give more lift to a point. So when we pull this right up and we get all that tilt back on the blades, then the engine sorts itself out. The engine increases the torque and engine speed and things like that to match. So the engine sorts itself out with this when we adjust the collective. But as we adjust that collective, the forces on the blades start to change. So on this side, as the blades are going forward, that gets lift because it's travelling into the wind. We are travelling forward at 209 knots. So the lift on this side of the blade is from 209 knots wind plus the rotation of the blades going forward, so it gets lift on that side. On this side, it's actually going backwards. So we're losing lift from 200 and something knots forward, plus the fact that, you know, it's also retreating as well, and that's where we get retreating blade stall. So if we go too fast, we basically lose all the lift on one side of the heli, and when we lose all the lift on one side of the heli, it does weird things like this. So once you understand retreating blade stall, that can help a lot with manoeuvres and trimming and things like that, because as I say, as you increase the speed of the blades, that stall point starts moving from somewhere in the centre of the blades and it starts drifting off to the retreating side. So as we get so far, it gets all the way to the end of the blade, we get no lift on that side, and well, it actually moves a bit further around just because of how helicopters work, and because we get no lift, it's actually somewhere near the back. You'll probably notice the helicopter does things like this, like kind of tilts up and over to the side like that, because we get lift at the front corner and we get no lift at the back corner. So, like I said, understanding how the blades work and the lift can help a lot with this. Now, as I've just come round doing some jerky motions there, I'm at probably 1/3 collective, and I'll show you that we can trim this as well. So, let's just get the yaw trim, get the trim ball in the middle, so we're getting forward stable flight. Again, looking at the trim circle in the input, try and get the trim circle over the input. Now, my yaw trim is way off, that pulled me straight to the left there, so let's pull it back round. Steady, straighten her up again. Almost straight flight. Once again, let go, watch the ball. The ball is drifting off and down, off to the right and down, so I want left and a little bit of up. Let's once again get that trim ball in the middle. And we're a little bit up and left, so let's go down and right ever so slightly on the trim. And there we go, it's pretty stable. It's still going slightly off to the right. I could put a tiny bit more left on there. Also notice I'm turning a little bit. I'm also losing speed there. My velocity vector was very high up, so that's also going to be difficult to trim, because as we start losing speed, as we go forwards, the helicopter starts to get something called translational lift. So when we're in a stable hover, there's no additional air moving over the blades, so it's not helping the lift as we go forwards. Once we get past about 15-16 knots, we're into translational lift, and that gives us more lift as we move in forward. So when you want to try and gain height, you want to be moving forwards really. You don't want to be trying getting height in a hover, because the engine is having to work extra hard to do that. Whereas with a bit of forward momentum, we get translational lift, and it's a lot easier to control the heli. But because, oops, let me get that back in trim. We went off a little bit there because my forward speed went up from 80 knots to 190 knots. So again, the forces on the blades are changing, so we've got to trim again. And a little bit to the right. Just drifting off to the right a bit. Let's pull it back left. Just watching this ball. Going to the left. Going down a bit. Let's tilt back. Drifting down a little bit more back on the trim, and that's good enough. So there we go, we're back in trim. So there we go, a shortish video from me there about trimming the helicopter. Like I said, it is going to change all the time when you're trimming the helicopter, just because you change speeds, different altitudes. Obviously, the lower you are, the more air, so the more lift you're going to get. The higher up, the less lift, thinner air. All different things like that will affect the heli and the trim. One of the easiest things to do if you just want, as a pilot, if you want to take your hand off stick, is just put the autopilot on. Try not to use the nav because it gets a bit crazy because it wants to set the height as well. So I would suggest just putting the altitude autopilot on and then heading, because that will keep your height and maintain straightforward flight. But if you do want to trim, those are the tools and tricks that I use to try and help me trim. Use the yaw trim ball at the bottom, use the trim square at the bottom right, and use the I'm not quite sure what the circle's called. It's like a force gauge or whatever you want to call it, to show the center of gravity on the helicopter. So you know, if you're tilting right, left, backwards, forwards, you can use that ball to do your fine trim. So thank you very much for watching. My name's the Ferret's Wheels, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.